Hello, you Mortlach makers. Good malt mention there, nice and simple and straightforward. And thank you to Martin Down for that malt mention. Thank you, Martin. Your malt mention is introducing Ralphie Review 938. Wonderful. Welcome, malt mates, to the Bothy. Welcome to the middle of the Irish Sea, because that's where the Bothy is located. And this Bothy is where you're going to get unapologetic, unedited, unflannelled, unsanitised whisky reviews and reviews of other spirits. And interestingly, you might like to know that my channel's actually been growing slowly but continuously since 2009. So I'm really quite a long established YouTuber, and the channel's never diminished. I've never lost a whole load of subscribers, and one of the reasons is that I'm just giving an honest opinion about spirits that I encounter. And there's something I can do because I buy the bottles I review, and because I buy them, I'm not under any subliminal unwritten contract to stick to saying nice things and to almost apologise and explain away when poor bottlings appear on the market, which unfortunately we're seeing more of. And being an independent reviewer, I'm very fortunate to be located in the British Isles, so that accessing the wide diversity of single malt Scotch bottlings is relatively easy for me to do. Now, I don't get them all, and there are frequently independent and official bottlings which are bottled exclusively for markets outside of the UK. A very good example is Korea. Another example is Taiwan. Another example is Malaysia. Another example is Germany, and another example is Italy, and yet a further example, more recently, but certainly growing rapidly, is these exclusive bottlings for the United States of America, on which my name is attached to some of them, for the very simple reason I get no commission, but when I see a distiller who's getting it right, and I want to give a little nudge of support to, I may occasionally allow them to use my name on one of their bottlings, commission free, on the understanding that they're just going to give a little bit to the local charity. So it works. I've recently had a very small series reviewing blended Scotch whisky, and I have to say, for an experienced whisky drinker, it was relatively disappointing. But let me put this into context. In a specialist whisky channel, the people who are going to be watching you, the malt mates, are highly likely to have bought quite a number of single malt whiskies and other quality spirits, and you're getting your bearings, and now you want to take things further so that you don't make the mistake of buying poor quality bottlings. And what happens is our palates develop, inevitably with experience. Experience empowered and enhanced by what's available on the internet. More so than what you'll read in books, actually. That's the way it is. And as we get more experienced, we're spending more money, and we're recognising when something's not right with a whisky. When we start out, everything's sweet, everything's fine, because we have no points of reference. But as time goes on, we get more points of reference. And inevitably, this is why we come to independent bottlings. We gravitate to them, because as our palate grows more complex, we're looking to source bottles that are going to challenge and be more demanding for the palate. But there's a skill to this, maltmates. And I'm going to review this Talisker 12-year-old, and in the extras, 938 extras, I'm going to talk about the challenges that we face with higher strength, non-chill filtered, no colourant added independent bottlings, because they set up their own array of challenges and they can disappoint too. Now, here's a really good example of a recent bottling in the UK market from independent bottler Douglas Lang. It's Old Particular. Let me introduce this bottling to you. Now that I've introduced the scenario for the context in which I'm reviewing this. It's a bottle of Talisker which you don't see often from independent bottlers. It's 12 years old and it's been bottled natural colour and unchill filtered, one of 355 bottles from a refill hogshead reference, and I'll give you the reference because you want to know this. Once I get the steam off my steam punker, it does steam up actually, it's the humidity in the bothy. DL 15638, that's DL 15638. And this single cask was distilled in November 2009, bottled March 2022, unchill filtered and no colouring. It says so on the label. And then the clincher, the absolute final little bit of information that brings it all together, the bottling strength is 48.4. So here we have something that you never see from Diageo, who own the distillery. It's a single cask bottling, and the reason that Diageo don't do it is because it's too much hassle for them. They just don't want the hassle because it costs a little bit extra to do it. So it's up to the independent bottlers who'll buy what they're given. Now this means that the whisky will come in the cask that they're given, and it won't be a great cask. It's highly unlikely unless you're paying a premium. So it's up to the independent bottler to decide, do we let this maturation go the full distance in that cask, or do we recask it into perhaps a different, more active, or a fresh emptied wet cask that previously contained the same spirit. You know, there's a number of options there. So now we've set the scene here. Independent bottling, total integrity, Talisker, makes it quite interesting. It's the reason I bought it. So what do we do? What do we find in the nose? What we find is something that will not remind you of an official bottling of Talisker. It's different. It's significantly different. There's a phenolic in there, but the phenolic's quite light. The phenolic has really subsided in a refill hogshead cask. Now the refill means that the spirit is pretty well intact because a fresh fill would impose more cask flavours and previous content flavours into the whisky. But this is a refill cask, so it's already previously been filled with a spirit, possibly Talisker, possibly not. Quite possibly not. You see, if the previous content was, for example, off the top of my head, Othroysk, Ciananich, Glentochers, Ardnamurchan, it wouldn't be Ardnamurchan, it wouldn't, Tamnavullen, very good choice, or Strathmill. These are the sort of distillery casks that are available to independent bottlers. And when they bottle a cask, they've got this nice, fresh, wet ex-whisky cask. What are they going to do with it? Burn it? No. They're going to keep it wet, store it for a couple of weeks, and then fill it again. And this is why the name on the label does not necessarily become immediately identifiable with what's in the glass when you're an experienced whisky drinker. So if you know Talisker, because you've bought official bottlings in the past, particularly the 10-year-old or the Skye, it can be good occasionally. You're wondering, what is this barley sugar, citrusy, icingy, delicate phenolic whisky? It's not what I imagined Talisker to be. And that's in the nose. When you taste it, boom, now you're getting the phenolics, but you're getting deeply caramelized, naturally caramelized, almost concentrated citrus, like a citrus cordial phenolic. And it's a big blast, but it's quite animated, quite lively. There's a lot of overripe fresh fruit in this, particularly banana and pineapple. And without doubt, in my opinion, this Talisker is being influenced by the previous content from another single malt distillery, because the signature in the palate is slightly confused, in a good way, in a good way. However, when we add water to this, something happens, and I'm going to add full 5 millilitres because I really want to open it up, because there's something happening in here I need to explain to you. And this is advice I give to anybody who's venturing into independent bottlers. What they bottle is unconventional quite often. Unless it's Gordon and MacPhail, certain of the ranges, they provide quite conventional bottlings, maybe 43% chill filtered, and they add caramel. Because they're such a big independent bottler, they want to try and spread their net a bit. But here with Douglas Laing, relatively small, when you nose it, you immediately get a kind of grain sour, like a mixed mash bill bourbon sort of note. Vanilla, gingery, it's still relatively pleasant. However, and it doesn't take long, as soon as you sip this, nice, fresh, fruity, slightly phenolic arrival. Excuse me. I'm dribbling. This is so embarrassing. The experts would never do this. I really need to stop sipping before I start talking. That would make it easier for me. Anyway, back to the review. So you taste it. Fresh fruit. Overripe. Almost like a Jamaican rum meets Islay. A Jamaican rum comes to Islay. That's a really good descriptor. And then into the development, you get this flat, sour grain thing going on. You're past the arrival, you're starting to move into the development, you're kind of about a third of the way into the development, and suddenly the fruity flavours just disappear abruptly, and you get this really flat, sour, grainy note which goes right through the development and right into the finish as well, and then just fades. And you'll be saying to yourself, when you first experience it, you'll be saying to yourself, oh no, I've bought a duffer. There's something wrong with the cask. There's something wrong with the whiskey. Well, not really. It's just the way it happens to be delivering it through the uniqueness of the provenance of the bottling. Now, if I was bottling this, if it was one of my casks, I would have sought out, if I could, another empty Talisker cask to reinvigorate it with more of a conventional flavour. But the thing is, they are really, really hard to find. And I really wouldn't want to put a fresh cask finish on this, sherry, bourbon, Madeira or rum. It probably wouldn't work. What would work is leaving this another 2 to 4 years to see if that flat note matures itself out of the way. In the meantime, when you leave your glass of independent bottling, integrity whiskey at high strength, more time, you give it more time. And what you will find is that flat sour note starts to fade. It never completely goes, but it fades significantly as the cask influence, which is primarily American oak, starts to exert itself and the flavour from the spirit also starts to exert itself more over time. This whisky really needs time. See with independent bottlings, I'm telling you, malt mates, you have to slow things down significantly. This isn't whisky for sharing with company and having a good laugh. This is for solitary dramming. This is when you're in your laboratory, in your whisky cave, in your malt corner, in your bourbon bar. This is when you've got the time and you've made the time and you're giving it the time to really explore in a way that the majority of customers would never dream of doing. Because they're consumers. They're passive. One final taste as the Scotch mist starts to appear. Bright, feisty, citrusy, singular, interesting, complex, and the citrus is now moving, even after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the citrus is now moving into the flat zone that was previously there and filling out the flavours. It's restoring it. Time in the glass, so important. It's to say, you see, a minute for every year in the cask. High strength, independent bottlings, double it, 24 minutes. Time will soon pass by. I'm going to give this 85 out of 100. It's an integrity malt mark. There you have it. For 12-year-old independent bottling of Talisker. Very interesting whisky. But you need to experience to access it. You really do. And that's why if you join me in Ralphie Review 938 Extras, I'm going to be talking about accessing, specifically techniques for accessing these independent bottlings before I review any more. Simple as that. There you go. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, click subscribe if you haven't, and have a look at my Patreon channel on patreon.com. It's a little subscriber channel. All you do is buy Ralphie a dram, join up, and you will get additional extra content. And you will get this content 24 hours early. And there you go. I'm Ralphie from the Bothy. Over and out, malt mates. Keep it malty.